8 minutes after Nurse Evelyn Hart clocked out for the last time, the men who never salute anyone looked her in the eye and called her ma'am, not as a courtesy, as a rank she'd earned in blood and noise. Have you ever been so tired you promised yourself just once you'd stop running toward the alarms? That night in Norfolk, Virginia, rain slicked the asphalt outside St. Bridget Medical Center, and Evelyn was thinking about a hot bath, a quiet house, and the kind of sleep you can't bill for. She didn't see the dark SUV with its lights off. She didn't hear the boots until it was too late. Stay with me, because this isn't just a rescue story. It's about what you become when duty doesn't let you clock out. If you're watching, hit like, leave a comment with your city, and let's go. That word still rang with a strange weight, like it belonged to another life. Ma'am, not a pleasantry, not a habit, a kind of acknowledgement. But earlier that night, Evelyn Hart was exactly what she had always been, a woman in faded scrubs, moving through fluorescent light like it was weather. St. Bridget Medical Center sat a few blocks from the Norfolk waterfront, all glass and brick and constant motion. Even at midnight, the place never really slept. Ambulances slid in under the canopy with their red lights muted by rain. The automatic doors sighed open and shut in a steady rhythm. Inside, the emergency department hummed with machines and voices, and the thin, persistent beep of monitors that never stopped asking for attention. Evelyn had lived in that sound for 3 decades. It wasn't loud to her anymore. It was the language of her body. She could hear the difference between a harmless alarm and a true slide toward disaster without looking up. She could taste it in the air when a room was about to turn. Tonight, the air smelled like antiseptic and wet wool and burnt coffee, and underneath it, the faint metallic note of fear that always rose around the sick and the waiting. She moved from bay to bay with a clipboard tucked against her ribs, her badge swinging on its frayed lanyard. A young man on a gurney stared at the ceiling with pupils blown wide, jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. A mother sat upright with her toddler in her lap, both of them bundled in damp jackets, the child's cheeks flushed and sticky with fever. A construction worker held a rag to his hand, red, seeping through the cloth in slow pulses as he tried to act like he wasn't in pain. Evelyn didn't rush. Rushing was for people trying to prove they belonged. She belonged. Her calm had weight. When she leaned in close to the toddler's mother, her voice dropped into that warm, steady register that made people believe they could get through the next minute. "He's hot," the mother whispered, eyes glassy. "I know," Evelyn said. She touched the child's forehead with the back of her fingers, then met the mother's gaze. "We're going to bring it down. You're doing fine. Keep him against you. Let him feel you there." Across the unit, someone called her name the way you call for something you need immediately. Evelyn. Dr. Ethan Price stood at the nurse's station pen, spinning between his fingers like it was tethering him to reality. He was a good doctor. She'd watched him come in bright and cocky, and she'd watched him learn humility in the space between life and death. Tonight, he looked restless, as if the walls had moved closer. "You're still here," he said, trying to make it sound casual. "I work here," she replied, and didn't bother to soften it with a smile. Her smile would come when she meant it. "What do you need?" He leaned in and lowered his voice, but the worry was visible, even in the way he held his shoulders. "You really going through with it?" Evelyn tapped the stack of patient charts on the counter until the edges lined up perfectly. It was a habit that had nothing to do with paper and everything to do with order. "My thumbprint says I am." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "I still don't accept it. That's not required." He looked past her toward the hallway, where a nurse hurried by with a tray toward the trauma bay doors, toward the rolling chaos that had always steadied him because she had been in it. "Who's going to tell me when I'm about to kill someone with the wrong dosage?" Evelyn finally glanced up. His eyes were too earnest. He wasn't trying to be dramatic. He was admitting fear, which was the first sign he might actually be fine without her. "You'll read the chart," she said. "Like I told you 1,000 times. It's not the same." "It is time," she answered, and heard the faintest tremor in her own voice. She hated that he could make her feel it. She hated that leaving meant letting go of a place that had consumed her and shaped her and kept her upright through grief. On the wall behind him, the clock ticked toward midnight. The second hand moved with the slow cruelty of something that didn't care about human feelings. 11:48. 7 minutes left. Evelyn returned to her rounds, but the unit felt different now that there was an ending pinned to it. She'd always worked nights. Nights were honest. Nights stripped away the performance. The questions were simpler at 3 in the morning. Is the airway open? Is the heart beating? Is the bleeding controlled? Can the pain be managed? Nights were about getting someone to sunrise. But tonight, she kept catching herself looking at things she had never really seen before. The scuff mark on the linoleum by Trauma 2, where a gurney wheel had chewed into it years ago. The old motivational poster by the break room that read, "Compassion is a choice," in a font that made her think of middle school. The way the overhead lights flickered for half a second whenever the elevator opened, like the building itself was blinking. Someone had taped a paper sign above the nurse's station. Happy Retirement, Evelyn. The letters were lopsided. It was sweet. It was also painfully small compared to the magnitude of what she'd done here. When she walked into the break room, they'd made room for her between a humming vending machine and a table crowded with paper plates. There was a sheet cake with too much frosting, the kind you buy because it's there and it's easy. In thick blue gel, it said, "Thank you, Evelyn." Under it, someone had tried to draw a stethoscope. It looked like a question mark. "Come on," one of the nurses said, grinning. "We waited because you keep pretending you're not leaving." Evelyn sat the plastic chair, squeaking. She accepted a paper plate and a fork that bent the moment it touched cake. Around her, the people who had sweated and cursed and laughed in the trenches of the night shift tried to make the moment light. Someone joked about her finally getting to sleep like a civilian. Someone asked if she was going to miss the smell of hospital coffee. Evelyn let herself laugh because that's what you do when people try to love you in the only way they know how. A nurse from days someone Evelyn barely knew pressed a gift bag into her hands. From admin, she said like an apology. Inside was a plastic watch with a hospital logo and a slogan about excellence. Evelyn held it up and stared at it. It felt like being handed a souvenir from a place she'd been trapped in. "Don't spend it all at once," she murmured. The room laughed, but her laugh caught in her throat. The break room felt too warm, too bright. The walls felt close, like they were trying to keep her there. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't pull it out. She was in the middle of smiling for someone's camera, and she didn't want the moment ruined by the world asking for her again. When she finally checked it a minute later, it was a missed call with a name she recognized without thinking. Coastal Donation Center. She stared at it for a beat, thumb hovering. The call was normal. It was a part of her life as predictable as rent. She had a rare blood type, rare enough that her file had a little flag on it, rare enough that people sounded relieved when she answered. They called her on a schedule. Sometimes they pleaded. Sometimes they tried to make it casual. Evelyn had always said yes because she knew what it meant when there was no match. Tonight, she slid the phone back into her pocket. Not now, not tonight. A voice crackled over the intercom, sharp and urgent. Code Blue. Bay 4. The room went quiet for half a second, as if the entire unit inhaled together. Evelyn's body reacted before her mind did. Her shoulders tightened, her feet shifted. Her hands were already moving toward the door. Then she stopped. Across the break room, a new nurse, Jessica Lane, was already sprinting, pulling a crash cart behind her like a stubborn animal. Jessica's ponytail swung. Her face was too young, too pale, too determined. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. This was what she was here to do. Evelyn's throat tightened. She could feel the old instinct screaming in her bones. Run. Fix it. Lead. Her hand reached the door handle and froze there. Not my fight, she told herself. Not anymore. It felt like betrayal, even though she knew it wasn't. It felt like tearing a piece of herself away and leaving it on the floor. Ethan was already gone, his chair skittering backward as he ran. The break room emptied like a drained cup. The laughter and frosting and paper plates turned into a quiet mess no one had time to clean. Evelyn stood alone for a second, listening to the distant cadence of footsteps and the hard, rising voices of a code. Her heart beat once heavy. Then she walked out slow and deliberate, not toward Bay 4, but towards the time clock. The hallway outside the emergency department was colder. The air smelled faintly of rain carried in on jackets and shoes. A man in a wheelchair sat near the waiting room, his hands clasped tight, eyes fixed on the triage doors like prayer. A security guard leaned against a wall, pretending he wasn't listening to the code call, pretending he didn't know that sometimes the line between a quiet night and a tragedy was one bad minute. Evelyn passed them her tote bag, heavy on her shoulder. It held ordinary things, the kind of clutter that comes from living in one place too long. A spare phone charger, a pair of reading glasses, a small first aid kit that made her laugh because she knew what she could do with nothing, and yet she still carried Band-Aids like superstition. There was a folded umbrella and a half-finished box of cake she'd promised to drop at her neighbor's place because Mrs. Delaney always watched her cat when Evelyn was stuck on shift. The time clock stood near the staff entrance. Old, temperamental. A biometric scanner that often rejected thumbs like it was in a bad mood. Evelyn stared at it, then pressed her thumb to the glass. Beep. Accepted. The screen flashed her name and the words shift end. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She didn't know she'd been holding that breath for years, but there it was, trapped and stale in her chest. She let it go slowly, like letting go could make it real. Behind her, the hospital kept moving. The code team shouted. A monitor alarmed. Wheels squeaked. Someone laughed in the wrong place because hospitals are like that, life and death and absurdity stacked on top of each other until you stop noticing the weight. Evelyn picked up her tote, adjusted the strap, and walked through the staff doors. Outside, the rain hit her face like cold fingers. Norfolk in late fall had a damp chill that crawled under clothes and into bones. The streetlights painted slick patches of yellow on the wet pavement. The wind carried the smell of salt from the water, and something industrial from the shipyards, a faint tang of metal and fuel that never quite left the air. She pulled her coat tighter and stepped under the umbrella, but the wind shoved the rain sideways anyway. It splattered her shoes. It soaked the cuffs of her scrubs. She didn't mind. The weather felt like something honest. The hospital renovations had pushed staff parking to an overflow garage farther down. It was a concrete structure that always seemed damp, even on dry days. The walk to it took her past a row of closed clinics and a construction fence wrapped in plastic that snapped in the wind. Her footsteps sounded too loud in the quiet. For the first time in weeks, her mind reached toward her own house without the usual countdown. She pictured the porch light she always left on for herself. She pictured Marbles, her gray cat, with the crooked ear waiting on the windowsill like a judge. She pictured the bottle of red wine she'd been saving, the one she told herself she'd open when she finally had a night that belonged only to her. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't pull it out. She couldn't take one more request from the world. Not tonight. A car passed on the street tires, hissing through puddles. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance, then faded. Evelyn kept walking. At the intersection, the crosswalk signal chirped. She stepped off the curb umbrella, tilted against the wind. Her tote bag bumped her hip with each step. The box of cake inside shifted, frosting smearing against cardboard. She almost laughed at it. 30 years of life and death, and she was leaving with a smashed piece of grocery store cake and a plastic watch. The streetlight changed, and she reached the other side. The overflow garage loomed ahead, its entrance, a dark mouth framed by concrete. Inside, the lights flickered in that sickly yellow way that made shadows look deeper than they were. Evelyn adjusted her grip on the umbrella and walked toward it, the rain drumming steady on fabric above her head, each step carrying her farther from the emergency department's hum and closer to the quiet she had been craving. The quiet she had been craving felt thin now, like a sheet pulled too tight. The garage swallowed sound in a way that made every small noise seem incriminating. Her shoes scuffed wet concrete. Water dripped somewhere in the dark, with the patient patience of a leak that had learned it would never be fixed. The wind pushed rain through the open mouth of the structure and carried it into the upper levels in cold, needling gusts. Evelyn stepped inside and paused just long enough to let her eyes adjust. The lighting was the kind that made everyone look sick. Sodium bulbs buzzing overhead, their glow reflecting off puddles and smeared halos. The air was cooler in here, damp and stale, and it smelled faintly of exhaust wet dust and old concrete. She told herself it was nothing. Her body was still tuned to alarms, still listening for danger in the way a mother listens for a baby's cry. That was all. 30 years in an emergency department trained you to be suspicious of quiet. Her car sat where she remembered it, a dark blue crossover tucked near a support pillar far from the ramp. It looked ordinary. It looked tired. A thin line of road grime ran along the bottom panels, and the rear bumper had a small scrape from a parking lot years ago. It was the kind of car that blended into backgrounds, the kind of car no one stared at. Evelyn adjusted her tote bag higher on her shoulder and started walking toward it. The umbrella was useless now. The garage roof caught most of the rain, but the wind blew mist sideways through the open sides and tiny cold droplets collected on her eyelashes. The box of cake shifted inside the tote frosting, smearing again, and she felt a flicker of irritation at how life always managed to make a mess even on the way out. Halfway there, she slowed. A pickup truck sat parked too close to the ramp. It was dusty, older, its paint dull under the lights. It did not look out of place in a garage that served hospital staff and construction crews. What made her notice it was not the truck itself, but the way it was positioned. Angled, ready, as if it could pull out fast without needing to reverse. Evelyn glanced away and kept walking, but her skin tightened over her spine. She had learned not to ignore that feeling. Most people called it paranoia. In her world, it was pattern recognition. The early warning system that told her when a patient was about to crash before the monitors admitted it. She listened. Nothing. No footsteps behind her. No voices. No laughter. No phone conversations. The level was nearly empty, and the emptiness made her footsteps louder. A steady rhythm that echoed off concrete pillars and came back to her like a second set of steps a beat behind. She stopped again just before reaching her driver's side door. Her keys were in her hand, metal cool and slick, and the little plastic hospital badge attached to the ring clicked softly against the fob. She hated the sound. It felt like announcing her location. She slid the key between her fingers to quiet it and reached for the handle. A smell hit her. It was sharp and sweet at the same time, a chemical note that did not belong in this damp concrete place. For a moment, her mind tried to label it as something harmless. Cleaning solvent, paint thinner. Then her memory snapped into focus with the certainty of a diagnosis. Ether. Not the hospital smell of antiseptic and bleach. Not the perfume and sweat of the waiting room. Ether, clean and wrong, like a door opened into a different kind of room. Evelyn's hand froze on the handle. Her breath shortened not because she was panicking, but because her brain was gathering data fast. Smell first, then a faint metallic tang underneath it. Ozone like overheated electronics, and something else that made her jaw tighten. Gun oil. The kind that clung to cloth and skin after a range day. She turned her head slowly, scanning the level. Her eyes followed shadows along pillars. She looked at the pickup by the ramp. She looked towards the stairwell door, its small window dark. She looked down the lane between parked cars, long and empty. She saw nothing. That was the problem. If there was a threat, it was not careless. It was not moving in the open. It was waiting. You are tired, she told herself. You just clocked out. You are hearing ghosts. She opened the driver door and tossed her tote bag onto the passenger seat. The umbrella collapsed with a wet snap and rolled off the seat toward the floor. Evelyn leaned in to set the cake box, carefully trying not to tip it. Her hands moved with the same efficiency she used when placing instruments on a tray. She was still performing order even here. Then, as she reached to pull the door shut, a gloved hand slammed onto the doorframe. The sound was violent. A hard, flat impact that made her flinch before she could control it. The door stopped dead, held open by a hand that looked too large to belong to anyone who worked in a hospital. Evelyn sucked in a breath and looked up. A figure stood over her close enough that she could smell him over the ether. He wore matte black tactical gear that swallowed light. No patches, no logos, no visible rank. His face was covered by a tight mask, leaving only his eyes exposed. The eyes were calm, not drunk calm, not frantic calm, professional calm, the kind she saw in trauma surgeons when they were deep in a procedure when fear would only get in the way. The man spoke in a voice that carried no heat. Evelyn Hart. It was not a question. Her heart slammed once heavy and hard, and then her body moved on instinct. Evelyn's right hand went toward her keychain, pepper spray fingers fumbling for the small cylinder as she tried to pivot her hips and slide backward out of the seat. "Who are you?" she said, voice rough and then louder, sharper as the survival part of her took over. "Back off." The man did not back off. He leaned in slightly, not aggressive, just closing distance. "Ma'am," he said, and the word landed wrong in her ear like something rehearsed. "Step out of the vehicle. We do not want to hurt you." "Ma'am." In that tone, it sounded like procedure. Evelyn felt a flash of anger, bright and sharp. She was not his ma'am. She was nobody's ma'am in a parking garage. "Take it," she snapped, voice rising. "Take the car, take the bag. I have cash. Just take it and leave." The man's eyes did not change. "We do not want your money," he said. Her pepper spray came free. Evelyn brought it up between them, thumb pressing on the trigger guard. He moved. His hand flashed forward, not swatting, not twisting, just closing around her wrist with a grip that felt like steel. The pepper spray dropped. It clattered against the floor mat and rolled under the seat. Evelyn's mouth opened, and the sound that came out of her was raw. "Help!" She screamed loud enough to tear her throat. "Help, fire." The word fire carried further than help. People responded to fire. People ran toward fire. Evelyn had said it to patients before to get attention, to cut through confusion. No one came. The man's other hand reached into his gear and she saw something small and metallic. A device with a cylinder. He brought it toward her neck. Evelyn twisted, trying to pull away, trying to drive her elbow into his ribs. She was not trained to fight, but she had restrained violent patients, had held down thrashing bodies long enough for sedation, had thrown her weight into situations when she had to. This was different. This was controlled. He anticipated her movement before she completed it. His grip did not tighten painfully. It simply held immovable like a clamp. "Please," he said again, and it sounded almost like disappointment. "Do not make noise." Evelyn's eyes darted past him. The level was empty. The pickup near the ramp remained still, its windshield dark. The stairwell door did not open. The elevator did not ding. The concrete swallowed her scream and returned it to her as echo. She saw a second figure, then not moving into the light, just a shape behind a pillar, a whisper of black fabric, another pair of eyes reflecting faintly. She wasn't dealing with one man. She was dealing with a team. Her breath hitched, and the nurse part of her brain tried to regain control, tried to assess like she would in the trauma bay. Airway, breathing circulation. Threat, escape routes, options. Option 1, run. Not possible with her wrist pin. Option 2, fight. Her leverage was wrong. He had position and strength and intent. Option 3, bargain. Not with men who already had her name. Option 4, survive. She swallowed hard and forced her voice into something lower, steadier. "If you hurt me in here, you will not get out. There are cameras." The man's eyes flicked toward the ceiling just once. It was too quick to read, but it told her something. Either he knew where the cameras were, or he had already handled them. His hand pressed the device to the side of her neck. A hiss. Cold sensation spread under her skin, followed by warmth, a bloom that raced along her veins. Evelyn felt her body try to recoil, then fail. The world did not immediately go black. Instead, it tilted as if the garage floor had become a slanted deck. Her voice came out thick. "What did you—" Her tongue felt too large. Her hands felt far away. The man caught her as she sagged, lowering her carefully so her head did not strike the steering wheel. His movements were almost gentle. It made her stomach twist. Violence wrapped in courtesy was worse than brutality. Brutality was honest. She blinked hard, trying to keep her eyes open, trying to memorize details. The man's gloves were black, but the seams showed a faint pattern, reinforced stitching. His gear was clean. Not brand new, but maintained. The smell of gun oil was stronger now, close enough to be in her mouth. She tried to turn her head to find the license plate number of the pickup by the ramp to fix it in memory. The lights above her smeared into long streaks. Her brain reached for pharmacology the way it always did when a patient's condition shifted. Rapid onset. Not inhaled. Not a syringe. Pressed to skin. Compressed delivery. Ketamine. No, ketamine made people dissociate, made them fight the fall. This felt like her muscles were simply unplugging. Something else. A sedative with a fast effect and low volume, a field administration. She felt her eyelids heavy. A voice spoke near her, not the man's, coming from somewhere behind her head. It had the clipped cadence of someone reading a checklist. Target secured. Another voice replied, tinny and distant like it came through an earpiece. Vitals. Stable, the first voice said. Move. Evelyn tried to focus on the sound of the words. Target, vitals, move. They were talking about her as if she were a package. Her anger flared again, but it floated on the edge of her fading consciousness like a candle trying to stay lit in wind. Her cheek brushed against fabric as they lifted her. Her skin felt rain-cold, but her core was going warm and numb. The world rocked gently as they carried her out of the driver's seat. For a moment, she saw the garage ceiling pass above her, the long fluorescent tubes flickering. The sound of her own pulse filled her ears, slow and loud. Then she was moving through the open air. Rain hit her face again, a cold slap that should have sharpened her awareness. Instead, it felt distant like rain on a window while you sat inside. She tried to speak. Her lips barely moved. "Please," she managed, and it came out like a breath. No one answered. They carried her with speed and purpose. Her head lolled, and her gaze caught a flash of black vehicle near the garage exit. A large SUV, dark paint, swallowing light, parked with its engine running so quietly she could not hear it over the rain. A door opened. Warm air spilled out, smelling of leather and electronics. Her body was slid onto something padded. The motion jostled her stomach, and for a second, nausea rose. A seatbelt clicked. Not the hospital restraint kind. A heavy latch. Her senses narrowed to fragments. The faint buzz of a radio. A man's voice murmuring numbers. A digital chirp that reminded her of the IV pumps at work. Then the vehicle began to move. Evelyn tried to count turns, tried to map their route the way she would if she were awake enough. Left, right, straight. The sedative swallowed time. The rhythm of motion became a lullaby she had not asked for. In the darkness behind her eyelids, her mind grabbed at anchors, marbles on the windowsill. The hospital clock ticking toward midnight. Ethan's worried eyes. The missed call from the donation center. Why would anyone take her? She was a nurse. She had no clearance, no secrets, no money worth kidnapping for. Unless this was not about money. Unless it was about something inside her. The thought drifted through her like smoke, and then the sedative pressed down again, heavier. Voices floated in and out of reach. Window is 20 minutes. Cameras are looped. Local patrol is clear. Words that belonged to a world she had never seen. At some point, the vehicle slowed. The sound of rain changed less sharp, more muted. They had moved under cover, perhaps into a tunnel or under a structure. Evelyn felt herself lifted again. The air was colder now, and it smelled different. Not salt and rain, oil and metal, a place where machines lived. Her shoulder bumped lightly against something hard, a door frame. Someone adjusted their grip to keep her from striking it. Again, that careful handling. She wanted to scream at them for it. Wanted them to be the monsters they were acting like, not these efficient professionals who carried her like she mattered. Her mind tried to force wakefulness. It failed. She drifted deeper. Time became strange elastic. She could not tell if minutes passed or hours. The only certainty was that she was being moved, carried through space by people who knew exactly where they were going. At the edge of her awareness, she heard a faint mechanical groan, a large door being opened, and then the hollow acoustics of a cavernous interior. Footsteps echoed. Voices sounded distant, bouncing off high walls. A warehouse, her mind suggested. A hangar, somewhere big and empty. Her body was placed down onto a surface that felt firm beneath her back. Not a bed, not a gurney. Something utilitarian, padded but not comfortable. A new smell crept into her nose, old dust, diesel, the sour bite of a generator running. The air was cooler here, but not outdoor cold. Industrial cold. Someone's hand pressed lightly against her wrist. 2 fingers on the pulse point. Checking. Stable, a voice said. Another voice, closer this time, replied with impatience. Get the lights ready. We cannot waste time. Evelyn tried to open her eyes. They fluttered and failed. A faint sting on her arm made her flinch. Something adhesive. Tape. Maybe a monitor lead. Or a quick check, a needle prick. She felt her throat tighten with fear she could not fully access. She was a trauma nurse. She knew what being unconscious in the wrong hands meant. She forced air into her lungs, slow and deliberate, trying to stay grounded. In, out, in, out. Her body refused to cooperate. Her muscles lay heavy, disconnected from her intent. The voices continued above her like a conversation in another room. Confirm identity. Confirmed. Any injuries from pickup? No, minimal restraint. They were proud of that, she realized. Proud that they had not hurt her. Proud that they were efficient. Evelyn's thoughts turned sharp with fury. She did not care that they were gentle. She did not care about their restraint. They had taken her. They had stolen her autonomy with the casual certainty of people who believed their mission gave them ownership over her body. A hand brushed her hair away from her face. It was a small gesture, almost human. Her stomach twisted again. She tried to bite, to kick, to do anything. Nothing worked. A metallic click sounded near her head. The snap of a case opening, tools. The professional part of her brain cataloged it automatically. Clamps. Perhaps a syringe. Perhaps a vial. She felt a wave of cold fear, so strong it broke through the sedation for a heartbeat. Her eyes opened a sliver. Light stabbed at her vision, bright floodlights that made everything a blur. Shapes moved in the glare. Dark figures. A flash of a pale hand ungloved near a screen. Then her eyes slid shut again. Wake her up, someone said. The voice was not the one who had called her ma'am in the garage. This voice had a different texture. Smooth. Educated. The tone of a man used to being obeyed. Now the voice added, and the impatience carried a thin edge of menace. Evelyn's mouth tried to form words. Her tongue stuck. She heard a soft tear as something was opened. A small crack like a capsule snapped. The sharp bite of ammonia drifted toward her nose, and even through the sedation her body reacted. Her lungs seized. Her eyes snapped open wide and watering as the world surged into focus with brutal clarity. The ammonia hit like a slap, sharp enough to rip her back through the fog. Evelyn jerked forward, coughing eyes watering hard. The light in the room was brutal white floodlights aimed down from tall stands, turning every shadow into a hard-edged shape. Her wrists were free. That should have been comforting. It was not. She sat on a metal folding chair. Cold seeped through her scrubs into her thighs. A strip of tape clung to the inside of her forearm where someone had checked a vein. Her mouth tasted like chemicals and fear. The air smelled of generator exhaust and dust layered with something cleaner. Something clinical, as if someone had tried to drag a hospital into a place that did not deserve it. "Easy," a voice said, low and controlled. "Do not make it harder than it needs to be." Evelyn blinked fast, forcing her vision to steady. Her gaze swept the space on instinct the same way she scanned a trauma bay when a patient rolled in with blood on the gurney and no story. High ceiling lost in darkness. Concrete floor marked by tire streaks. Shipping pallets stacked near a corrugated wall. A portable heater humming in the corner, not strong enough to warm the room, only strong enough to make the cold feel deliberate. Two men in tactical gear stood behind her chair rifles, angled down but ready. Their faces were covered. Their posture was quiet. Violence, disciplined and professional. Not street criminals. Not kids. These were men who moved like they had been trained to move with a weapon in their hands. In front of her stood a man in a suit that did not belong in a warehouse. Dark coat, crisp collar shoes that had never known mud. He was in his 50s, silver hair combed back as if order itself was a habit. His face looked carved, not handsome, just hard. He held himself like someone used to rooms rearranging for him. Evelyn's throat ached when she spoke. "Where am I?" "You are safe," the man said, and the lie landed with no effort like he said it every day. "As long as you cooperate." Evelyn kept her voice flat. Panic wasted oxygen. "Who are you?" He did not answer. He did not need to. Men like him did not offer names unless they were getting something in return. He stepped closer and she caught a faint scent of expensive cologne fighting the warehouse air. He looked down at her like she was an item on a list. "Evelyn Hart," he said. 32 years in emergency medicine. Night shift charge nurse. No disciplinary actions. No debt worth noting. No living spouse. One cat. Evelyn's skin tightened. She hated the accuracy. She hated the casual way he had picked apart her life. "What do you want?" she asked. The man's eyes stayed calm. "I am going to ask you to do something. If you do it, you will go home with $5 million in an account you can access from anywhere. If you do not, you will die here." The words were delivered the way a doctor delivered prognosis, clean and unadorned. Evelyn stared at him and waited for her body to react. Her pulse hammered, but her hand stayed still in her lap. She had sat at too many bedsides with families who wanted the truth. She had learned that fear did not change facts. "I am a nurse," she said. "If you want money, you have the wrong person." A flicker crossed his face, irritation or impatience. "I do not need your money." "Then why offer it?" "Because I prefer compliance," he said. "It saves time." Evelyn swallowed once. Her tongue felt thick. She forced it to work. "You could have asked." The man's gaze sharpened. "You would have said no." Evelyn did not answer because he was right. He stepped aside. Evelyn's eyes went to the makeshift table behind him. At first, it looked like a stack of crates draped in white cloth. Then the cloth lifted slightly with the rise and fall of breath shallow and uneven. A body lay there. Evelyn's stomach dropped, not from horror, but from instinct. Patient, skin pale. A chest exposed to the cold air ribs faintly visible with each strained inhale. The man's torso was a map of old scars, some jagged, some clean. The kind of scars that came from knives and bullets, and places where the lights were not kind. Fresh blood darkened the cloth near his right side. Evelyn rose without thinking. One of the masked men behind her shifted rifle coming up a fraction, but the man in the suit lifted his hand. "Let her," he said. Evelyn walked forward every step measured. She did not run. Running made people mistake urgency for panic. She stopped at the table and looked down. The patient was in his 30s, dark hair damp with sweat. A bruise blooming along his jaw as if someone had struck him hard. His lips were pale, tinged with blue at the edges. A monitor sat beside him on a crate, portable and military, its numbers flickering in bright green. Heart rate 132. Blood pressure 78/46. Oxygen 91 and falling. Shock. She reached for his skin and paused. Not because she needed permission, because she wanted control. She placed her fingers against his neck, feeling for carotid pulse. Rapid, thready. She pressed her palm to his sternum, felt the shallow rise. Gunshot, she said more to herself than to anyone else. The man in the suit answered anyway. Upper right quadrant, through and through. 2 hours ago. 2 hours. Evelyn's head turned sharply. Where's the surgeon? The suit tilted his chin toward a laptop on a nearby crate. The screen showed a video feed of a masked doctor, eyes focused and cold. The doctor's voice crackled through a speaker with a faint delay. She is awake, the doctor said. Evelyn looked at the screen. Who are you? You can call me Dr. Calhoun, the doctor replied. I will be guiding the procedure. Evelyn almost laughed, a short, bitter sound that never quite escaped her throat. Guiding. From a screen. You are not operating. The man in the suit said. You are assisting. Evelyn's gaze flicked back to the patient. The wound had been packed with a dark gauze, the kind soldiers carried. Combat gauze. Blood seeped through anyway, slow and steady, dark enough to suggest venous bleeding and internal pooling. He needs a hospital, Evelyn said. A trauma surgeon, a CT scan, blood products, an operating room. We cannot take him to a hospital, the suit replied. Why? The suit's calm cracked for a moment, and Evelyn caught something in it. Fear. Not for the patient. Fear of a system. We are not welcome, he said, not tonight. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. So you brought the hospital to him. We brought you, the suit corrected. Evelyn's stomach tightened again. Why me? The suit nodded to one of the masked men. The man stepped forward and placed a sealed case on the table beside Evelyn, opening it with practiced speed. Inside was a transfusion kit, unlike anything she had seen outside a military setting. Heavy-duty, tubing clamps, needles, bags, a pressure cuff designed for rapid infusion. Everything packed, sterile. Everything labeled in block letters. Evelyn stared at it, then looked back at the suit. We need blood, he said. Evelyn's jaw clenched. Then call the blood bank. The suit's mouth tightened. We do not have time for banks. Evelyn looked down at the patient's face. He was unconscious, but his brow was drawn tight, as if even in darkness he was fighting. Whose blood, she asked, already suspecting. The suit met her eyes. Yours. Evelyn's throat went dry. No. You will, he said, and his voice remained calm, which made it worse. Evelyn turned toward the laptop as if the doctor might be a human shield. This is insane. Direct transfusion in a warehouse without cross-matching, without screening, without any of the safeguards that keep people alive. Dr. Calhoun's eyes did not blink. Compatibility has been confirmed. Evelyn snapped her gaze back to the suit. By who? The suit did not answer the question. He answered the one he wanted. He has what we call a golden blood profile, he said. Evelyn went still. In nursing school, the lecture had been brief, tucked between ABO basics and RH factors presented like a trivia fact because most of the room would never see it. A blood type so rare it was almost myth. A phenotype so unusual that when someone had it, the donor pool could be counted on one hand in some regions. Her blood. RH null. Evelyn's mouth opened, and for the first time since she woke up, her calm faltered. You know about that. The suit's eyes sharpened with satisfaction. Of course we do. Evelyn felt cold wash through her, colder than the warehouse air. The Coastal Donation Center. The calls. The file flags. The quiet urgency in the voice when she answered. She remembered a nurse coordinator once telling her, half-joking, half-reverent, that her blood was priceless. She had laughed then. She was a nurse. She did not think of herself as rare. She thought of herself as tired. You went into my medical records, she said. The suit's expression did not change. We went where we needed to go. Evelyn's hands curled into fists at her sides. That is illegal. The suit's gaze held hers. So is letting him die if you are the only one who can stop it. Evelyn stared at the patient. He did not look like a child. He did not look innocent. He looked like someone who had lived inside violence for a long time. But he was still a human body losing blood. A human heart failing. "Who is he?" she asked. "That does not matter," the suit said. "Hook it up." Evelyn's voice came out low, dangerous. "It matters to me." The suit stepped closer. "You do not get to have opinions here." Evelyn lifted her chin, eyes sharp. "You dragged me here because you need my hands. You want him alive. That means you are going to hear my opinion." One of the masked men shifted his rifle slightly, a subtle threat. Evelyn did not flinch. She had stared down violent patients bigger than him with nothing but a badge and a voice. This was different, but her spine remembered how to hold. "You will donate," the suit said, and the patience in his tone was gone, now replaced by steel. Now. Evelyn's mind raced not for escape, but for leverage. People who kidnapped a nurse for blood did not want her dead. Not yet. That meant her life had value. Value was leverage. She took a slow breath. "If you want a direct transfusion, you do it under my conditions." The suit's eyes narrowed. "You are not in a position to bargain." Evelyn stepped closer to the table, placing her body between the patient and the suit. Subtle but intentional. "You said he has minutes. You also said you need me. Those are my bargaining chips. I do not need a gun to understand math." The suit's jaw worked. He looked like a man used to controlling rooms. Evelyn spoke fast, crisp, clinical. "I need a large bore IV 16 gauge. 2 lines if you have them. I need normal saline and pressure bags. I need oxygen. I need a warmer. I need a monitor with a reliable cuff. I need someone to keep their hands clean. If you contaminate my line and he goes septic, your money means nothing." Dr. Calhoun's voice cut in flat and unamused. "We do not have a warmer." Evelyn shot a look at the screen. "Then we improvise. Blankets, heat packs, anything. Hypothermia kills, shock and cold is a coffin." The suit's eyes flicked to his men, and Evelyn saw the calculation. He needed the patient alive. He needed speed. He also needed the nurse functioning. A broken nurse was useless. "Do what she says," he snapped. The masked men moved immediately, and something inside Evelyn tightened. They listened to him because he owned them. They would listen to her because she owned the only path forward. One of them shoved a bag of supplies toward her. Another rolled a portable oxygen tank closer. A third opened another case with sterile packs and IV catheters. Evelyn reached for gloves, snapped them on, and forced herself to focus. Fear was there, a hot wire under her ribs, but she buried it under protocol. Her voice took on that charge nurse edge that made residents straighten up and medics stop arguing. "Give me the catheter," she said. A masked man held it out. His hands were steady. He looked at her like she was a tool. Evelyn did not care. She took it anyway. She rolled up her left sleeve. Her skin was pale under the floodlight veins visible in blue lines she knew better than most streets in Norfolk. "You," she said to the nearest masked man, "hold the tourniquet. Not too tight. I need flow." He hesitated, then did it. Evelyn cleaned the site with an alcohol swab, the smell sharp and familiar. Her hands moved with muscle memory. She inserted the needle smoothly, felt the flash of blood advance, the catheter secured it with tape. The simple act grounded her. This was what she did. This was what she was. She attached the tubing and watched the line fill. The suit stepped closer, watching her like he was watching a lock being picked. Evelyn met his gaze. "If I pass out, he dies. So you are going to give me something to drink, and you are going to keep me seated when I need to sit." The suit's mouth tightened. "You will not pass out." Evelyn's eyes stayed hard. "You do not get to tell my body what it can tolerate." She turned to the patient. His arm lay limp, veins collapsed from shock. Evelyn palpated the skin, searching for something she could use. She felt a faint vein near the elbow too small for what she wanted. She looked at his wrist, then his hand. "His circulation is poor," she said. "I need a central line or a better vein." Dr. Calhoun's voice came through the speaker. "Peripheral will do if you move quickly." Evelyn's jaw clenched. "Peripheral will do if you want a clot and an infiltration." The suit's patience snapped. "Stop wasting time." Evelyn turned on him like a blade. "Then stop interrupting. Your patient is in shock. His veins are collapsing. If I blow the line, you lose him. If you want to threaten someone, threaten the ceiling." Something shifted in the suit's expression. Surprise, maybe, that she had teeth. He lifted a hand and his men went still. Evelyn leaned over the patient, found a vein in the forearm, and placed the catheter with careful pressure. She secured it, taped it down, and connected a saline flush. It pushed with resistance at first, then eased. "Good," she murmured. The monitor chirped oxygen dropping to 88, heart rate climbing. Evelyn looked up. "He needs oxygen now." A masked man lifted the mask toward the patient's face. Evelyn caught his wrist. "Not like that," she snapped. "Seal it. If you leave gaps, it is useless." The man adjusted, and Evelyn watched the patient's chest rise shallowly under the mask. The oxygen number steadied, then ticked upward by 1 point. Evelyn turned back to the suit. "You said compatibility is confirmed. Tell me how." The suit did not answer, but Dr. Calhoun did. "His ABO is O. Your ABO is O. His Rh phenotype requires blood without Rh antigens. You have none. It is compatible." Evelyn's mouth went tight. She hated that he was right. She hated that it made sense. The suit took a step closer. "Now," Evelyn held out her arm. "Then give me a bag." A masked man handed her a sterile blood bag with tubing attached. Evelyn connected it to her IV line, adjusted the clamp, and watched her blood begin to flow dark and steady. She felt a strange disorientation watching it. Her blood leaving her body collecting in plastic. She had donated before dozens of times in clean chairs with nurses who smiled and offered cookies. This was not that. This was extraction dressed up as necessity. Evelyn kept her voice steady. "How much do you need?" Dr. Calhoun answered. 1 unit to start." 1 unit, Evelyn repeated, doing the math in her head. She was not a small woman, but she was not young either. A unit could drop her blood pressure, make her dizzy, make her hands shake. Hands that were needed. "You," she said to the nearest masked man, "bring me water, now." He looked toward the suit for permission. The suit nodded once. The man moved. Evelyn watched the bag fill. Her heart hammered, but her breathing stayed controlled. She kept glancing at the monitor, tracking the patient's numbers like she was tethered to them. Blood pressure remained low, heart rate remained high. Oxygen hovered. She looked at the wound again. "He is still bleeding internally." "We cannot operate here," the suit said, impatience creeping back. Evelyn did not look away from the patient. "Then we do what we can. We keep him perfused. We keep him warm. We keep him alive until someone with a scalpel can open him." The suit's eyes flicked to Dr. Calhoun on the laptop. "How long?" Dr. Calhoun's voice was tight. "He has minutes before he arrests." The suit slammed his palm against the edge of a crate, the first crack in his composure. "Then move." Evelyn's eyes snapped to him. "Not until the bag is ready." The suit leaned in, voice low and dangerous. "You are testing me." Evelyn leaned in right back, close enough to smell his cologne through the warehouse air. "You are testing physiology. It does not care who you are." The bag filled, and Evelyn clamped the line, disconnecting herself with quick efficiency. A wave of lightheadedness rolled through her, and she rode it like a swell, keeping her face calm. She taped the site, pressed a gauze pad against it, and took the water when it arrived, drinking in controlled sips. Then she moved to the patient. She held the blood bag up, connected the tubing to his line, and adjusted the clamp. The blood began to flow into him, a thin, dark river moving through clear plastic. Evelyn watched his face for any sign of reaction. Hives, flushing, swelling difficulty, breathing sudden fever. She watched the monitor 2 heart rate oxygen pressure. "Watch his skin," she said to a masked man. "If he starts itching, if his face swells, if he coughs, you tell me immediately." The man nodded once sharp. The suit looked irritated. "He will not react. This is correct blood." Evelyn's eyes stayed on the patient. "Correct blood can still kill you if it moves too fast or your body is too weak. Do not talk to me like you know medicine." The suit's mouth opened then shut. He looked away as if the argument was beneath him. Evelyn did not care. If she had learned anything in the emergency department, it was that arrogance killed faster than infection. Minutes passed in a tense hush broken only by the generator hum and the soft chirp of the monitor. Evelyn counted each beep like it mattered, because it did. Slowly, almost grudgingly, the patient's blood pressure nudged upward. 82/50. Evelyn exhaled through her nose. Better. The suit checked his watch. "We are leaving." Evelyn kept her hand on the patient's wrist, feeling the pulse strengthen. "He is not stable enough to move. We are not safe here," the suit replied. Evelyn turned her head, eyes narrow. "From who?" The suit's gaze hardened. "From the people who put that bullet in him." Evelyn's chest tightened, not with fear, but with understanding. This was not a random shooting. This was a hunt. She looked at the patient again, at the old scars and the fresh blood. She did not know his name. She did not know what he had done. She knew only that his body was fighting to stay in the world. "You brought him here," she said. "You chose this place." The suit's expression was cold. This place was secure until it was not. Evelyn's eyes flicked around the warehouse, floodlights, portable equipment, masked men. Someone had planned this, planned it like a procedure, planned it like they had done it before. Her mind returned to the garage, the ether, the gloved hand, the calm voice calling her by name, the efficient way they had carried her. They did not act like desperate criminals. They acted like a unit, and now the suit was acting like a man whose plan was unraveling. Evelyn's voice went quiet. "Who are you?" The suit looked at her as if she was asking for a bedtime story. "Not your concern." "It is my concern," Evelyn said, and her tone turned harder. "You put your hands on me. You brought me here. You put me next to a dying man. You threatened my life. I am already involved. So tell me who you are." Dr. Calhoun's voice cut in brisk. "Focus on the transfusion. Her questions are irrelevant." Evelyn glanced at the laptop. "You are calm for someone watching a man bleed out through a webcam." The doctor's eyes did not move. "Calm is how we keep people alive." Evelyn almost smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "No. Calm is how you keep yourself comfortable." The suit stepped forward again, voice dropping. "Enough." Evelyn turned toward him, fully standing upright. She felt the dizziness from blood loss tug at the edges of her vision, but she did not show it. She had stood through worse. "You want him alive," she said. "Then you are going to listen." The suit's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. He was realizing, perhaps unwillingly, that her steadiness was not optional. Evelyn pointed toward the patient's abdomen. "He is bleeding internally. If you move him too fast, that packing will shift. If it shifts, the hemorrhage worsens. If that hemorrhage worsens, you will be carrying a corpse. And you will still have me, but you will not have what you want." The suit's eyes narrowed. "What we want is him alive. We move now." Evelyn held his gaze. "Then we move in a way that does not kill him. I need a stretcher with secure straps. I need someone steady to hold the blood bag at the right height. I need the tubing secured so it does not rip. I need oxygen maintained. I need a second line started in case this one fails. If you cannot provide that, you do not move him." The suit stared at her for a long moment. Behind him, one of the masked men shifted his weight, listening. The balance of the room had changed. It was subtle, but Evelyn could feel it. They were still dangerous. They still had guns. But now the room was arranged around her knowledge. The suit spoke through his teeth. "Fine." Evelyn did not relax. She turned back to the patient, checked the line again, adjusted the clamp slightly. She watched his face for reaction. Watched his chest. Watched his numbers. A faint tremor ran through the warehouse floor. So small, it could have been the generator. Evelyn felt it anyway. Her eyes lifted toward the far wall. Another tremor followed, heavier. The masked men stiffened. One of them raised a hand to his ear, listening to something on comms. The suit's face tightened. Status. The masked man replied without emotion. Movement outside. Unknown. Evelyn's pulse jumped. She looked around, searching for exits, searching for cover. A nurse's brain did that too. Where would you put the crash cart? Where would you place the oxygen? Where would you stand if someone started swinging? She glanced at the laptop. Dr. Calhoun's eyes had shifted, now alert. "Do not stop," the doctor said. "Keep the blood flowing." Evelyn's hands stayed on the tubing, but her attention sharpened. The air felt different. Tense, charged, as if the room itself had inhaled. A faint sound drifted through the warehouse, muffled by distance and rain. A metallic clank. Then another, not random, not wind, footsteps, heavy and controlled. The masked men spread slightly, rifles coming up. They moved with practiced coordination, taking positions that covered doors and corners. The suit stared toward the main entrance face, hardening. "They are early." Evelyn's voice came out low. "Who is early?" The suit did not answer. He did not need to. The room answered for him. The floodlights flickered once, twice. Then the warehouse went black. For a fraction of a second, Evelyn heard her own breathing loud in the darkness. She felt the blood bag in her hand, the warm plastic slick with condensation. She felt the patient's wrist under her fingers, pulse still there, still fighting. A red emergency strobe snapped on, pulsing slow and ominous, turning everyone into jerky silhouettes. The masked men's rifles glinted briefly as the red light swept across them. A deep crack sounded at the main doors like metal protesting. Then a boom violent enough to punch air through the room. The doors buckled inward with a scream of twisting steel, and smoke rolled across the floor in thick white waves. The smoke came in low and fast, hugging the concrete like a living thing. It swallowed the floodlights first, then the ankles of the masked men, then the legs of the makeshift table. The red strobe turned every movement into a series of frozen frames. Evelyn clamped her hand around the blood bag and held the tubing close to the patient's arm, protecting the line the way she would protect an airway. Her ears filled with sound. Metal screaming. Boots pounding. A sharp chorus of rifles being shouldered. The mercenaries moved with drilled precision. Two angled toward the blown doors. One snapped to the left wall. Another took the right muzzle, steady finger indexed along the trigger guard. Graham Sloan did not reach for a weapon. He stepped back from the table, eyes fixed on the smoke as if he could will it into giving him answers. "Seal the rear," he said, voice clipped. A masked man darted toward a side exit. Evelyn stayed planted. The patient's skin had gone waxy, his lips pale under the oxygen mask. The monitor numbers flickered with every pulse of the red light. Heart rate 138. Blood pressure 84/52. Oxygen 90. Her blood was moving into him. She could see it in the clear tubing, a dark river pushed by gravity and necessity. A shape appeared in the smoke. Not a mercenary. This one moved differently. Lower. Faster. Controlled in a way that made Evelyn's stomach tighten. A green laser cut a thin line through the white haze, then vanished. Gunfire erupted. It was deafening inside the warehouse. The concussion slapped her chest. Sparks jumped off metal crates. The table shuddered. Evelyn threw her body forward, covering the patient with her own twisting, so the blood bag stayed upright. She felt the air move past her face, hot and angry, and then the sound layered over itself. Rifles answering rifles, a rapid staccato that made her teeth vibrate. Someone screamed. Not the patient, not Evelyn. A mercenary shocked by pain. Another shape appeared through the smoke, Then another moving in a coordinated sweep. Their silhouettes were bulky with gear helmets, rifles, and lenses that glinted green for a heartbeat when the strobe hit them. They did not hesitate. 2 short shots, 1 target down. Another pivot, another pair of shots. No wasted motion, no shouting, just violent efficiency. Evelyn kept her face pressed near the patient's shoulder, breath shallow. She could smell blood and disinfectant and smoke. Her heart hammered, but her hands stayed on the tubing. A figure cut across the strobe close enough that she saw the pattern of camouflage on the uniform and the wide, curved goggles over the eyes. The rifle swung toward the table, toward Evelyn, toward the patient. Evelyn lifted her head just enough to see the barrel. Her breath hitched. She did not have time to think. Her mouth opened. "Stop!" she shouted, voice tearing through the gunfire. "He is bleeding. I am working." The rifle steadied. A red laser dot danced across the top of her forehead. Evelyn froze, eyes wide, not pleading, just braced. The dot held for a fraction of a second that felt like an hour. Then a voice boomed through the chaos, deeper than the gunfire, commanding enough to cut through it. "Check fire. Civilian on the deck." The firing stopped like a switch had been thrown. The sudden silence was so sharp it made Evelyn's ears ring. Boots thundered closer. Shadows moved around the table. Someone grabbed a mercenary by the collar and slammed him to the ground. Zip ties snapped tight. A rifle clattered away. Evelyn stayed where she was, still shielding the patient with her body. The blood bag trembled in her grip. Her arms ached. She could feel the bruise blooming at her IV site, where she had been sedated, and the fresh weakness in her legs from the blood she had given. A hand touched her shoulder, firm but not rough. "Ma'am," a male voice said close to her ear, controlled and urgent. "Look at me." Evelyn turned her head. The man above her wore a helmet and goggles pushed up. His face was streaked with rain and grime. His eyes were sharp and tired, the eyes of someone who had seen too much and could still make decisions. He kept his rifle lowered, angled away from her. "Who are you?" he asked. Evelyn swallowed hard. "Evelyn Hart, nurse." His gaze dropped to the patient, then to the blood bag, then to the line running between them. He saw the tape on her arm, the clamp in her hand, the oxygen mask on the patient's face. "Patient status," he said. "Shock." Evelyn replied, voice clipped, professional. "Gunshot wound. Internal bleed. I am transfusing. Do not touch the tubing." The man's jaw tightened. He leaned toward his shoulder mic. "Bravo 1 to command. We have the package. He is critical. We have a civilian providing medical care." Behind him, other operators moved through the smoke-clearing corners, calling out crisp confirmations. "Left clear. Right clear. Rear secure." A mercenary groaned somewhere near the blown doors. Another coughed, choking on smoke. Graham Sloan stumbled into view, one hand clamped to his shoulder. Blood ran between his fingers. His suit had torn at the seam. His face had lost its calm. He looked at Evelyn, then at the operator, and hatred flashed across his eyes, sharp as a blade. "You," Sloan rasped. One of the operators stepped toward him, muzzle rising. The leader snapped a short command, "Hold." 2 operators grabbed Sloan, forced him to his knees. He fought weakly, then sagged, breath hissing through clenched teeth. Evelyn ignored him. Her world was the patient and the line and the numbers. The operator leader crouched beside her, keeping his body between her and the blown doors. "How long can he last like this?" he asked. "He needs a trauma surgeon," Evelyn said, "now." "We are not taking him to a civilian hospital," the operator replied. Evelyn's eyes cut to him. "Then you will watch him die." His expression did not shift, but his voice softened a fraction as if he was choosing words carefully. "We have air coming in. 2 minutes." Evelyn shook her head once. "He is not stable enough to move." The operator glanced at the monitor. He did not pretend to understand the numbers the way she did. He understood pressure, time, risk. "Can you keep him alive for 20 minutes?" he asked. Evelyn stared at him, rain and smoke and red light blurring at the edges of her vision. Her body wanted to shake. She refused. "Get me a bag valve mask," she said. "Get me oxygen. Get me a stretcher that does not bounce like a shopping cart. And do not drop my blood." The operator's mouth twitched almost a smile. Then he turned his head and barked toward his team. "You heard the nurse. Move. Get a litter in here. Oxygen on the package. Keep that bloodline intact." His team moved instantly as if her orders had been coded into their training. Evelyn felt something shift inside her, a strange mix of anger and relief. They were lethal. They were disciplined. They were listening. A younger operator slid in beside her, breath, fast eyes wide. He wore a medic patch and carried a bag heavier than it looked. "Ma'am," he said, voice tight, "I am Nico Reyes, corpsman." Evelyn nodded once. "You are with me. You touch the line only if I tell you." "Yes, ma'am," Reyes said, and the word sounded different from Sloane's mercenaries. It sounded like respect. Two operators lifted the table slightly and slid a stretcher alongside. Evelyn kept the blood bag raised, adjusting her grip so the flow did not change. She watched the tubing for air. She watched the patient's arm for swelling. She watched the oxygen saturation for a drop. "On 3, the leader said, 1, 2, 3. They moved the patient with careful speed. Evelyn stayed close, walking backward, holding the blood bag high, her elbow locked. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced them to work. The warehouse door gaped open, rain blowing in. The night outside was a blur of streetlights and wet pavement. The smoke rolled out into the rain and vanished like it had never existed. Evelyn saw the black SUV near the loading area, engine running. She saw another vehicle with its lights off. She saw shapes moving in the dark, operators scanning rooftops and corners, rifles tracking invisible lines. "Stay between us," the leader said to Evelyn. "I am trying," she snapped, because fear made her sharp and exhaustion made her honest. They pushed through the rain, and the cold hit her like a wave. Her scrubs clung to her skin. Her hair plastered to her forehead. Her hands were numb around the blood bag, but she did not lower it. The sound of rotors grew distant at first, then rising, filling the air, until the rain itself seemed to vibrate. A Blackhawk dropped into view above the lot ghost, dark against the clouds. Its landing lights cut through rain in pale cones. The wind from the rotors turned the world into chaos rain, whipping sideways grit, stinging Evelyn's face. "Go, go, go," someone shouted. Operators ran with the stretcher boots splashing through puddles. Evelyn ran beside them, the blood bag held like a fragile lantern. The helicopter touched down skids, kissing wet pavement. A crew chief leaned out, one arm braced, shouting over the rotor roar. "Load it now." They shoved the stretcher into the cabin. Hands reached for Evelyn, grabbing her by the shoulder and hauling her up. Evelyn jerked away instinctively. "No." "The blood." "I have it," Reyes shouted, but his hands were full with the oxygen. Evelyn grabbed the stretcher rail and climbed in herself, knee hitting metal hard enough to send pain up her leg. She barely noticed. She dropped to the cabin floor beside the patient, keeping the blood bag upright, eyes on the tubing. The crew chief pointed at a seat. "Strap in." Evelyn shook her head. "I cannot. I have to watch the line." "Ma'am," the leader said now inside the helicopter, rain dripping off his gear. "We need you secured." Evelyn glared at him. "Secure me to the deck, then. I am not sitting like luggage." The leader looked at the crew chief and nodded once. "Hook her in," he ordered. "She stays with the package." A tether clipped to Evelyn's belt, heavy and reassuring. She felt the tug when the helicopter lifted, a sudden drop in her stomach as the ground fell away. The cabin vibrated with power. The sound was so loud it was almost physical. Evelyn braced her hand against the stretcher and checked the monitor. Numbers bounced with turbulence. Blood pressure 86/54. Heart rate 136. Oxygen 92. She leaned closer to the patient. His face was gray under the cabin lights. His jaw was clenched, breath shallow. The oxygen mask fogged faintly with each exhale. Reyes crawled toward her, one hand clamped to a strap, the other steadying his med bag. "I can manage airway," he shouted, voice strained, "but I do not know transfusion reactions." He is not reacting, Evelyn shouted back. Watch his skin, watch his breathing. If he starts wheezing, tell me. The leader leaned in from the other side headset, on eyes scanning outside through the open door. Name, he shouted to Evelyn over the rotor roar. What Evelyn shouted back. Your name. Evelyn. Senior Chief Jack Rourke, he said. You are with us now. Evelyn didn't care about his name, but she filed it anyway. Names mattered when you needed to yell at someone. The helicopter banked hard. Evelyn's shoulder slammed lightly into the stretcher. She caught herself keeping the blood bag from swinging. Her vision swam for a moment. Blood loss, stress, adrenaline. She forced a breath. In, out. The patient's oxygen saturation dipped. 89, 87. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Bag him. Reyes blinked. Man. Bag valve mask, Evelyn snapped. Now. Reyes grabbed the bag valve mask and moved to the patient's face. His hands trembled slightly, the way hands trembled when youth met responsibility. Evelyn placed her palm on the patient's chest. She felt movement on the left. On the right, almost nothing. The ribcage barely rose. Her stomach tightened. She leaned closer, listening with nothing but her ears. An instinct the way she had done 1,000 times when stethoscopes were lost under chaos. Breath sounds were faint, asymmetric. The patient's neck veins looked fuller than they should. Evelyn felt the shift in pressure as the helicopter climbed. She felt it in her own ears. She watched the patient's face tighten with silent strain. Tension pneumothorax, she shouted, voice cutting through the cabin noise. Right side. Reyes stared at her. From what? From the wound, or from positive pressure, Evelyn said. Air is trapped. It is compressing his lung and heart. He is going to arrest. Rourke's eyes sharpened. What do you need? Evelyn did not hesitate. 14-gauge angiocath. Do you have one? Reyes fumbled in his kit hands, shaking with turbulence and adrenaline. He pulled out a sealed package. I have one. Open it, Evelyn ordered. Reyes tore at the package. The helicopter lurched again, and the needle slipped from his fingers. It skittered across the vibrating floor and disappeared under a bench. Reyes froze horrified. No. Evelyn's jaw clenched. She did not waste breath on comfort. Find it. Reyes dropped to his hands and knees, reaching under the bench, fingers searching blind. The oxygen saturation dropped again. 85, 83. The patient's pulse on the monitor fluttered, then steadied at a dangerously fast rate. Rourke leaned in, eyes on Evelyn. Ma'am. Evelyn looked at him. She saw the question in his eyes. She saw the willingness. I need a blade, she shouted. Rourke did not blink. He reached to his chest rig, pulled a knife free, and placed it in her hand handle first. Reyes looked up, face pale. Ma'am, you cannot. Evelyn's eyes snapped to him, hard and focused. You can watch him die or you can hold him down. Reyes swallowed and nodded, fear swallowed by duty. Evelyn ripped the patient's shirt open, with her gloved hands' fabric tearing under strain. She exposed the right side of his chest, skin slick with sweat and rain. She spoke fast, not for drama, for focus. 5th intercostal space. Mid-axillary line, she said, and Reyes repeated it under his breath like a prayer. The cabin shook. The rotor roar filled her skull. She could feel her own blood pulsing in her ears. Evelyn placed her fingers against the patient's ribs, finding landmarks by touch. She did not have lidocaine. She did not have sterility. She had a dying man and seconds. Hold him, she ordered. Rourke pinned the patient's shoulder with one gloved hand, bracing against the cabin floor. Reyes held the patient's other side, eyes wide, jaw clenched. Evelyn took a breath and made the incision. The blade cut through skin with a wet give. The patient's body jerked faintly, even unconscious. Evelyn pushed deeper with controlled pressure, then withdrew the knife and used her gloved finger, forcing it into the opening, sweeping gently but firmly, breaking the seal that trapped the air. A hiss burst out loud enough that she heard it over the rotors. The patient gasped, a jagged inhale that lifted his chest. Reyes stared at the monitor, voice cracking. Oxygen is coming up. 87, 90, 92. Evelyn felt her knees go weak relief, hitting like a delayed wave. She stayed upright through sheer will. She kept her finger in place for a moment, ensuring the air could escape, then withdrew carefully. Blood bubbled at the incision, pink and frothy, but the chest rose more evenly now. Evelyn grabbed gauze, pressed it around the opening, not sealing it completely, keeping a path for trapped air. Rourke stared at her, rain and sweat streaking his face. His voice was quieter now, as if volume could not capture what he meant. "Who are you?" he asked. Evelyn's laugh came out short and harsh, more breath than sound. "I am the charge nurse," she said, "and you are making a mess of my patient." For the first time, Rourke's mouth twitched into something like a smile. It was brief. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Yes, ma'am," he said. The word landed differently now. It carried weight. Evelyn turned back to the patient, eyes scanning his face, his color, his breathing. She checked the bloodline. Still flowing, no air, no infiltration. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the crash of adrenaline and the loss of blood. She forced her voice steady. "Keep him warm." Reyes grabbed a thermal blanket and spread it over the patient's torso, careful not to tug on the tubing. His eyes flicked to Evelyn's arm, to the tape, to the bruise. "You gave a unit," he said, disbelief and respect mixed together. Evelyn's mouth tightened. "I gave what he needed." Rourke leaned toward his headset voice, turning operational again. "Status," he said. A crackle answered in his ear. He nodded once, then looked at Evelyn. "We are inbound to the ship," he said. Evelyn did not ask which ship. The smell of jet fuel and the weight of the air already told her the answer. Norfolk was a naval city. Ships were part of the horizon. War was part of the background. The helicopter leveled out. The vibration settled into a steady hum. Evelyn kept her palm on the patient's wrist, feeling the pulse, now stronger, still fast, but present. The patient's eyelids fluttered once, barely a tremor of consciousness. Evelyn leaned close, voice low, intimate in the roar. "Stay with me," she said. "Do not leave. You have already taken too much work to lose you now." His lips moved faintly under the oxygen mask. No words formed. Evelyn watched the monitor. Blood pressure held at 92/58. Oxygen 94. Reyes exhaled shakily. "Ma'am, you just did a chest decompression with a knife." Evelyn shot him a look. "Do not narrate my night." Reyes gave a breathless laugh that sounded more like relief. Rourke glanced between them, then back to the open door, where the night rushed past. The helicopter began to descend. The air changed heavy with salt and diesel. Evelyn felt the subtle shift in her stomach. The deck lights appeared below, bright, and ordered a grid of white and green slicing through rain. The Black Hawk settled onto the carrier deck with a hard, controlled thump. The door swung wider, and cold wind slammed into the cabin. "Move," Rourke shouted. Hands grabbed the stretcher and slid it toward the door. Sailors in deck gear waited outside, faces obscured by helmets and rain. They moved with practiced urgency, guiding the stretcher onto a rolling gurney that felt more stable than anything Evelyn had touched all night. Evelyn climbed out after them, boots slipping slightly on the wet, non-skid surface. The deck smelled of fuel and ocean and steel. It was loud, not just with rotors, but with the constant rumble of a living warship. She kept the blood bag high until the last possible moment, then handed it carefully to a corpsman who had appeared at her side with gloved hands. "Hold it upright," Evelyn snapped. The corpsman nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." There was that word again, floating around her like she had become a position rather than a person. They moved fast across the deck. Evelyn's legs felt unsteady, but she forced them to carry her. She stayed close to the stretcher, eyes fixed on the patient. Bright doors opened into the ship's interior, and suddenly the world was fluorescent again. Metal walls and narrow corridors, the smell of antiseptic replacing the smell of rain. Medical staff met them, uniforms, clean faces, focused. A surgeon in scrubs pushed forward, eyes immediately on the wound. "Who is managing transfusion?" the surgeon demanded. Evelyn raised a hand. "I am." The surgeon's gaze flicked to her bruised arm. The taped IV sight the blood on her gloves, then back to the patient. "Direct," he said, voice tight. Compatible, Evelyn replied. He needed it now. The surgeon did not argue. He snapped orders to his team. They moved the patient onto a bed with rails rolled him toward an operating suite. Evelyn followed until a hand stopped her gently. Rourke. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was quieter here away from rotors and gunfire. "You need to be checked." Evelyn tried to step around him. "My patient needs surgery." "He is getting it," Rourke said. "You are swaying." Evelyn wanted to deny it. Pride rose and fell in her chest. Then the world tilted slightly, and she realized he was right. The edges of her vision blurred, her body finally cashing the checks her mind had written all night. A medical officer stepped in, placing fingers on her wrist, checking her pulse with the same calm efficiency Evelyn had used on strangers. "Sit her down," the officer said. Evelyn opened her mouth to argue and then stopped. Her throat hurt. Her jaw ached. Her hands were shaking now, fine tremors. They guided her to a chair. Someone draped a blanket over her shoulders. It was navy gray and smelled faintly of detergent and metal. Evelyn stared at her hands. The blood on her gloves had dried into dark streaks. She flexed her fingers slowly, verifying they still belonged to her. Rourke crouched in front of her helmet, now off rainwater dripping from his hairline. "You did not have to do any of that," he said. Evelyn let out a short breath. He was dying. Rourke held her gaze, and for a moment the soldier in him faded, replaced by something raw and human. "I have seen men with medals freeze," he said. "You did not." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do not romanticize me." Rourke's mouth tightened, a ghost of a smile. "Yes, ma'am." A nurse in navy scrubs approached with a cup of water and a quick check of Evelyn's blood pressure. The cuff tightened around her arm, squeezing hard enough to ground her. "Pressure is low," the nurse said. "You donated." Evelyn nodded. 1 unit. The nurse's eyebrows lifted. "To a stranger." Evelyn's voice went flat. "To a patient." The nurse did not argue. She offered water. Evelyn drank slowly, swallowing with effort. Down the corridor, the operating room doors swung shut, sealing her patient inside with surgeons and bright light. Evelyn sat back, letting herself breathe for the first time since the garage. The ship vibrated beneath her, a constant low thrumming, the heartbeat of steel. Rourke stood turning as footsteps approached. A man in a white uniform appeared at the far end of the corridor, flanked by 2 officers. His posture was unhurried. His presence made the hallway feel smaller, like rank was a physical force. Evelyn's eyes caught the 4 stars on the collar, and her stomach tightened again. Rourke straightened automatically. "Admiral," he said. The man's gaze went past Rourke and landed on Evelyn. His eyes were steady, assessing. Not cold, not gentle. The look of someone used to carrying consequences. Evelyn lifted her chin slightly, too tired to be impressed. The Admiral stopped a few feet away. The corridor seemed to quiet around him, as if even the ship listened. "Evelyn Hart," he said, voice deep and controlled. "You are aboard a United States Navy carrier." Evelyn stared back. "Where is my patient?" "In surgery," the Admiral replied. "Stable." Evelyn's shoulders loosened by a fraction. The Admiral's gaze shifted to the bruising on her arm, the faint shake in her hands, the dried blood on her gloves. He did not ask if she was afraid. He did not ask if she understood. He looked at her like she was the reason something important had not fallen apart. Rourke remained beside her, quiet present. Evelyn swallowed once, tasting salt and smoke that still seemed stuck in her mouth. "Am I a prisoner?" she asked. The Admiral held her gaze. "You are not." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Then I'm going to wash my hands." Rourke's mouth twitched again, but he said nothing. The Admiral's expression did not change, yet something like respect settled in the air. Evelyn stood carefully, blanket sliding from her shoulders. Her legs wobbled, and Rourke reached out without asking, offering his forearm. It was not a gesture of charm, it was a gesture of support, the way staff helped each other after a hard code. Evelyn accepted it without comment. They began walking down the corridor past sailors who pressed themselves against bulkheads to let them pass, eyes following her with a quiet intensity she did not know how to carry. She kept her gaze forward, focusing on the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other, the way she did when a shift was ending, and the world outside the hospital was waiting. The fluorescent light overhead blurred slightly, and her eyelids felt heavy. The last thing she heard before her vision softened was Rourke's voice, close and steady. "Stay with us, ma'am." Rourke's voice stayed in her ear as they moved through the carrier's corridors, steady as a hand on a shoulder. "Stay with us, ma'am." Evelyn blinked hard, forcing the lights to stop smearing. The world inside the ship was all steel and narrow passageways, the air cold and over-conditioned, smelling of antiseptic layered over jet fuel. Sailors flattened themselves against bulkheads as they passed, eyes tracking the Admiral. First, then Rourke, then landing on Evelyn with a confusion that settled into something quieter. She felt it in the way they looked away, not dismissive but careful, as if she might be fragile cargo. She hated that. "I can walk," Evelyn muttered. Rourke did not argue. He just kept his forearm offered, letting her pride and gravity do the negotiation. They entered the medical bay, a clean pocket inside a war machine. It was brighter here, calmer in its own sterile way. A Navy nurse approached, immediately her expression professional, her hands already moving for a blood pressure cuff. "Ma'am, we need vitals." Evelyn's mouth tightened at the word. It followed her now like a title she had not applied for. A curtain slid back. A bed waited. The cuff squeezed her arm, a tight spiral that pulled her back into her body. "Pressure is 90/56, the Navy nurse said, glancing at the monitor. "Pulse 110. She donated recently." Evelyn's lips parted, 1 unit. The nurse's eyes flicked up surprised, then smoothed back into control. "Any chest pain? Shortness of breath?" "I am just tired," Evelyn said. The nurse guided her down onto the bed. Evelyn sat, then lay back because her head was spinning and she did not want to collapse in front of strangers. She stared at the ceiling tiles and listened to the ship's deep vibration, a constant, low rumble that reminded her of a ventilator in the background. Mechanical life support. The Admiral stepped closer, his white uniform crisp despite the rain and urgency. He did not sit. He did not loom. He took the space like it belonged to him without needing to prove it. "Mrs. Hart," he said. "Evelyn," she corrected automatically, then regretted it when she heard the edge in her own voice. The Admiral's gaze did not shift. "Admiral Thomas Kincaid." Evelyn's throat worked. "Where is he?" "In surgery," Kincaid said. "The surgeons are removing fragments and controlling the bleed. He is stable." Evelyn exhaled slowly, the first full breath she had allowed herself since the warehouse. Kincaid watched her face with the calm of someone who had ordered men into danger and lived with the math. "You were taken from hospital property. You were threatened. You were used. I am aware." Evelyn stared at him. "Then why am I here?" "Because you are the only reason he is alive long enough to matter," Kincaid replied. "And because he will not cooperate with anyone else." Evelyn's brow furrowed. "He is unconscious." "He will not remain unconscious," Kincaid said, voice even. "When he wakes, he is going to ask for you." Evelyn shifted the sheet, whispering, "Why would he ask for me? He does not know me." Rourke stood near the curtain, arms folded, face scrubbed of smoke but still marked by fatigue. He watched Kincaid, then watched Evelyn, as if measuring how much truth she could hold without tipping. Kincaid answered without dramatics. "He trusts you. You kept him alive when every other person in his orbit had an agenda." Evelyn swallowed. The sentence landed wrong in her chest, heavy and cold. The Navy nurse returned with a cup of water and a packet of crackers. Evelyn took the water because her mouth was still full of smoke and chemical taste. Kincaid waited until the nurse stepped away, then lowered his voice slightly. "His name is Miles Kavanagh." The name meant nothing to her. It was supposed to. You did not say names like that unless they were part of something larger. "He is an intelligence operative," Kincaid continued. "Deep cover. Embedded inside a network trafficking nuclear material. The kind of network that does not forgive betrayal. When he was compromised, he took steps to keep their buyers and intermediaries from disappearing into the dark. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the cup. What steps? He swallowed the key, Rourke said from the curtain line, voice low. Evelyn looked at him. A key. Rourke nodded once. The access code to a server holding identities. Routes. Buyers. Everything. He could not carry it. He could not transmit it. He could not allow it to be taken off him. Evelyn's stomach turned. So they shot him. They shot him, Kincaid said. And they hired men to retrieve him before he reached us. Those men hacked medical databases to locate a compatible donor. That is how they found you. Evelyn's jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. Her life reduced to a data point, a rare blood flag and a radius on a map. Kincaid's eyes stayed on hers. They intended to keep you until they were finished with him. Then they intended to remove loose ends. Evelyn's throat went tight. She remembered Sloane's calm promise of money. The flat statement that she would die if she did not comply. She believed him now more than she had in the warehouse. Rourke's hands clenched briefly, then loosened. We were tracking Miles's signal. It went weak. We were minutes behind. Evelyn shut her eyes for one beat, hearing again the warehouse door screaming as it buckled. Minutes behind. The kind of phrase that got people killed. She opened her eyes. So what now? Kincaid did not hesitate. Now we secure the intelligence. Now we protect the asset. Now we protect you. Evelyn gave a short laugh with no humor. You cannot protect me from what you already did. The Admiral did not flinch. You are correct. But I can ensure you leave this ship alive. And I can ensure the people who took you do not reach you again. A surgeon appeared at the curtain, mask lowered under his chin, face damp with sweat. His eyes found the Admiral first. Sir, he said, he is awake enough to be difficult. Kincaid's gaze sharpened. Is he stable? Stable, the surgeon replied. But we have not removed the airway tube. He cannot speak. He is writing. He keeps asking for the nurse. Evelyn's chest tightened. He is asking for me. The surgeon nodded. He is refusing everyone else. Kincaid looked at Evelyn as if offering an order disguised as a request. Can you walk? Evelyn swung her legs off the bed. The room tilted. She gripped the mattress edge until it steadied. Yes. Rourke was there, instantly, hand hovering near her elbow without touching unless needed. Evelyn straightened her shoulders and ignored the way her knees threatened to fold. Take me to him, she said. They moved through corridors again, turning down narrower passageways until the air changed cleaner, quieter, loaded with the soft hiss of medical machines. A sign marked the intensive care space. Guards stood outside, weapons slung, posture rigid. They glanced at the Admiral, then at Rourke, then at Evelyn. One of them stepped aside quickly, almost nervously. Inside, Miles lay on a bed, surrounded by equipment far beyond anything St. Bridget could afford. He was intubated, tubes secured at his mouth ventilator, doing the work of breath. His chest rose and fell with mechanical rhythm. A drain line ran from his side into a collection chamber. Bandages covered the wound. His skin still looked too pale, but there was color in it now, a stubborn human pink under the harsh light. His eyes were open, dark, alert, tracking. They latched onto Evelyn the moment she entered, and something in his face shifted relief and urgency braided together. Evelyn stepped to the bedside without asking anyone's permission. She took his hand. It was warm. That was all she needed to feel in that second. I am here, she said softly. Miles squeezed her fingers with weak force. His other hand trembled as he reached for a notepad on the tray table. A Navy nurse placed it under his palm and handed him a pen. Miles wrote slowly, letters shaky. S-A-F-E. Evelyn nodded once, safe. His eyes held hers, searching for lie lines. Evelyn did not flinch. She had lied to families before when she had to buy them time. She did not lie now. Miles's shoulders eased a fraction into the pillow. Then his gaze flicked past Evelyn to the Admiral and the armed men. His jaw tightened around the tube. He looked back at Evelyn and wrote again. You. Evelyn frowned. Me. Miles tapped the paper with impatience and wrote again harder, as if the act cost him. Only you. Evelyn's pulse kicked. She looked over her shoulder at Kincaid. The Admiral's face had gone still a mask of restraint. Evelyn looked back at Miles. What do you need? Miles's pen scratched slow and determined. He tore the page free with clumsy fingers and held it out to her like it weighed more than blood. Evelyn took it. A string of characters filled the paper. Letters and numbers uneven and urgent, the kind of thing that looked meaningless until you knew what it could unlock. Evelyn's stomach tightened. She held the paper carefully as if it might combust. Kincaid stepped closer, hand out. Miles's eyes flashed. His grip on Evelyn's fingers tightened, warning. Evelyn leaned toward him, voice low. I am giving it to him, but you are staying calm. You are not doing anything else right now. You are going to rest. Miles's gaze searched her face again. Then he loosened his grip slightly, just enough to say yes without writing it. Evelyn turned and placed the paper into Kincaid's hand. Kincaid took it like it was fragile and sacred, his fingers closing around the page with careful precision. He did not look at it yet. He looked at Evelyn. In that look was a weight she did not want the weight of being essential. Kincaid's posture changed. He stepped back one pace. His right hand rose to his brow in a crisp salute. The room held still. Rourke saluted, too automatic but not empty. Evelyn felt heat rise to her face. It annoyed her the way embarrassment always chose the worst moments. Stop, she said, voice rough. He needs sleep. Kincaid lowered his hand, but his eyes stayed on hers. Yes, ma'am. She hated how the word landed again, now heavy with meaning. A distant tone began to pulse through the ship, low and rhythmic. It was not an announcement chime. It was an alarm that made the air itself feel sharper. Kincaid's head turned slightly, listening. Then the ship's intercom blared with a voice tight under discipline. General quarters. General quarters. Missile inbound. Port side. The ICU seemed to contract. Nurses stilled. A guard's hand tightened on his weapon sling. Miles's eyes widened, panic rising fast, in a body that could not sit up, could not speak, could not run. He tried to lift his head and winced, fingers clawing at the sheets. Evelyn pressed her palm gently against his shoulder. No. Lie down. Rourke's radio crackled with overlapping voices. He listened, jaw setting. We have multiple, he said, voice clipped. Fast movers, anti-ship. Kincaid already had the page secured inside his uniform. He turned to go, then stopped and looked back at the room. Move the patient, a Navy nurse said urgently, eyes on the door. We should relocate him deeper. The surgeon who had been hovering in the corner shook his head, face tight. He has drains. He is fresh. Moving him risks tearing and bleeding. Rourke stepped forward, voice sharp. If the missiles hit this deck area, everyone in here dies. We need him in a protected compartment. The surgeon's eyes flashed. And if we move him, he dies anyway. The room filled with competing truths, each one sharp as a scalpel. Evelyn looked at the monitor. Miles's heart rate had jumped. 148. His blood pressure wobbled. Fear was doing what bullets could not. She looked at the door. It was heavy, thick steel with a wheel latch built to seal compartments. A blast door. A ship did not carry those for decoration. Lock it, Evelyn said. Rourke turned his head toward her, startled. Ma'am. Lock the door, Evelyn repeated, louder voice turning into the tone that made trauma rooms obey. Seal the hatch. The surgeon blinked. We will be trapped. Evelyn kept her eyes on Miles. We are already trapped. The difference is whether the steel does its job. Rourke hesitated. He listened to his radio, to the frantic cadence, to the numbers he could not change. Then he looked back at Evelyn. Her face was pale under the lights. Her hands were steady on Miles's shoulder. She was exhausted and still refusing to move. Rourke turned and barked at the guard. Seal it. The guard spun the wheel. Metal groaned. The door hissed as it shut, cutting off corridor noise and locking them inside a compartment that suddenly felt like a vault. The ship shook a deep vibration rolling through the deck. Not impact yet. Acceleration. The carrier turning into the threat engines, pushing hard. Red emergency lighting snapped on when the main lights flickered, bathing the room in a dim crimson that made everyone look like ghosts. Miles's eyes darted. His fingers tightened around Evelyn's hand again, the only thing he could control. Evelyn leaned close to his ear. "Look at me." His gaze found hers. "Breathe with the machine," she said. "Slow in your head. Slow out." Miles's eyes squeezed shut for a second, then opened again, trying to follow her words. Outside the sealed door, the ship's defensive guns engaged. The sound was not a single noise, but a tearing roar that vibrated through bone and metal. The deck trembled. Trays rattled. An IV pole shivered. The ventilator alarm chirped once, then steadied. A concussion rolled through the ship heavy enough that Evelyn's stomach lurched. The room jolted. A nurse stumbled and caught herself against a cabinet. The surgeon grabbed the bed rail. Miles's heart rate spiked again. Evelyn watched the monitor and did not let her face change. "Noise," she told him, voice calm, "just noise." Another thud closer. The ship shuddered as if something enormous had struck the water beside it. A voice came muffled through a speaker in the ceiling, urgent but controlled. One inbound intercepted, 2 inbound. Rourke stood near the bed body, angled protectively, without thinking. He looked like he wanted to be outside fighting with his hands. Instead, he was inside with a nurse and a patient and steel. Smoke began to creep in through a vent, faint at first, then thicker, carrying the bitter smell of something burning. A Navy nurse's eyes widened, fire. Evelyn's gaze stayed on Miles. Wet towel. Rourke blinked once, as if his brain had to shift gears. Then he moved fast, grabbing a cloth, soaking it at the sink and bringing it back. Evelyn placed it gently over the oxygen intake area near Miles's face, careful not to disrupt tubing. Small breaths, she told him. "You are doing fine." Miles's eyes stayed locked on hers. He could not nod, he could not speak, but his hand squeezed once, a faint pressure that said he heard her. The ship rocked again, harder. A cabinet door flew open, supplies spilling. A metal instrument tray slid and crashed to the floor. Someone cursed under their breath. Evelyn's knees bent slightly with the motion. She steadied herself with one hand on the bed rail, the other still holding Miles's hand. Another burst of gunfire sounded, a tearing, mechanical scream that made the room vibrate so violently the monitor screen blurred for a heartbeat. Then, sudden quiet between pulses, followed by a distant splash like a giant fist hitting the ocean. A voice over the intercom, strained with relief, cut through. "Third inbound neutralized. No detonation. Damage control teams responding." The ship's vibration eased, still alive, still moving, but no longer bracing for impact. Evelyn exhaled slowly. She did not realize she had been holding her breath until it left her. Miles's heart rate began to come down. 138, 132. Evelyn smoothed a damp lock of hair off his forehead. "There," she murmured. "Stay with me." Rourke's shoulders lowered a fraction. He dragged a hand down his face, leaving a smear of sweat. The door wheel turned from the outside. Metal groaned. The hatch opened, letting in corridor smoke and the sound of sailors shouting orders, boots running the organized chaos of a ship repairing itself. Kincaid stepped through soot smudging his uniform now. His eyes swept the room quickly, taking in the scattered supplies, the red lighting, the nurse standing at the bedside like a gate. "Report," he said. Evelyn did not move away from Miles. Patient stable. Airway secure. No fresh bleeding noted. Kincaid's gaze held on her for a beat, something profound passing through it without words. Then he nodded once and turned, already pulled back into the machinery of command. Hours blurred. The red lighting eventually gave way to normal illumination. Smoke thinned. The ship continued its life, loud and relentless, as if violence was just another weather pattern to navigate. Evelyn stayed by Miles's bedside longer than anyone ordered her to. She watched his numbers. She watched the drains. She listened to the ventilator hiss and the steady beep that meant life. When exhaustion finally collapsed her, it did not feel like sleep. It felt like falling into dark water. 21 days later, Norfolk rain tapped her kitchen window like it was trying to get her attention. Evelyn stood in her own house again, barefoot on familiar tile, holding a mug of coffee that tasted wrong because everything tasted wrong now. The living room looked unchanged. The couch still had the indent where she used to sit after shifts. The shelf still held the same framed photo of her and a younger version of herself smiling too brightly in a hospital hallway. Her car sat in the driveway, cleaned inside and out, the old scrape on the bumper repaired, as if someone had decided her life should look untouched. Even the air freshener smelled new vanilla instead of stale coffee and antiseptic. Her bank account, when she checked it, held numbers that did not belong to her. $5 million with a label that sounded like a joke consulting fee. The government had moved with terrifying efficiency. Forms appeared. Signatures were required. A man in a plain suit explained what she could not say. A woman with kind eyes told her she would be safe if she followed instructions. They all spoke like people who believed in procedures the way nurses believed in protocols. Mrs. Delaney from next door caught her at the mailbox the second day she was back. "Evelyn, honey," she said, eyes bright with worry and hunger for details. "The hospital said you had some kind of emergency leave. You look thin. Where did you go?" Evelyn's mouth formed the lie smoothly, as if it had been inserted into her like an IV family situation. "Oh dear," Mrs. Delaney said, leaning closer. "You look like you have seen a war." Evelyn smiled with her lips and not her eyes. Something like that. At 3 in the morning, she woke up drenched in sweat, heart-hammering hearing rotors that were not there. She lay still, listening to the quiet house to marbles, padding across the hallway and jumping onto the bed with a soft thump. The cat pressed against her ribs and purred like a small engine. Evelyn stared into the darkness until her breathing slowed. The rain kept falling outside, steady and indifferent, and she held her hand up in the dark, flexing her fingers, slowly confirming they were hers, confirming they could still be steady. Somewhere far beyond her porch light and her quiet street, a warship kept moving across water, and men like Rourke kept doing what they did. But the word followed her anyway, lodged in memory like a pulse you could not ignore. "Ma'am,"